Okay. Welcome. Welcome with peace, love, joy, and awe. I'm Reverend Cardona. I'm here with Reverend Lisa Benton. Goddi Lisa, beloved of my heart, we are here today, regardless of when anyone sees this, hears it, watches. We are dropping this recording on a very special day. July 14th is the birthday of Helen Schucman, scribe and channel of A Course in Miracles. It also happens to be my dad's birthday. And so I am happily here to honor them both. And you and I made a dedication to present 6 mystics in the course of 6 or 7 months. We're on our 6th mystic as of today. So we're wrapping up this particular series. It's no telling what else you and I might get into. But since every mystic was presented as someone that you were following on your spiritual path and that I could correlate to the principles of A Course in Miracles, we decided that we would wrap it up with Helen Schucman, who we are presenting today as the reluctant mystic, because like so many mystics, she was she was very concerned with what was going on within her as she began to hear, channel, and scribe this voice. And so we're going to go into some background, some history, and some understanding of why we believe Helen Schucman is the reluctant mystic and indeed a mystic. So why don't we begin together in prayer? We will take a nice deep breath together and exhale into our hearts. So we give thanks for the spirit that has been guiding us and leading us to some wonderful mystics these past 6 months. We've learned so much. We've dug so deep. We give thanks for each other. We give thanks for Helen Schucman and for all the people who came together and have continuously come together to walk the talk of A Course in Miracles as best we can. And even those days when we have spiritual amnesia and fall off the path, there we have a tool that pulls us back up lovingly, kindly, remembers us, waits for us, forgives us. For that and for so much more, as we move forward into this time together, we give thanks. Let's take another nice deep breath in. Exhale into this moment of gratitude and awe. And Goddi Lisa, here we go. Helen
Okay.
Hi, how are, first of all,
wonderful
how are you?
to see you.
And
yeah, and happy birthday, Helen in heaven. And
yes, happy birthday, Helen in heaven.
We're grateful for her. And as we go through this, people will see what just an amazing person she was, because she really, really went above and beyond. Not that any of the other mystics didn't. We have had such a wonderful, glorious, diverse group of mystics, and but it's just that with us both being teachers and students of Course in Miracles, to know this story so deeply and to learn even more, it's pretty amazing what she went through.
Yeah,
so
truly.
Before I start on her, I would like to just explain, as I do each time we talk about a mystic, the definition that you and I came up with for our purposes. We are not saying this is the only definition of mystic, but this is the definition of mystic that we use for our purposes, because there are many different definitions that people have. We believe that a mystic is someone who finds themselves in an ecstatic state of spiritual consciousness and connection to the divine. They come from all walks of life and religious backgrounds, and sometimes no religion at all. We also believe that a mystic is someone who seeks this divine connection on a regular basis and incorporates spirituality into every aspect of their life. So we will find that Helen did exactly what we were looking for when we did our definition. She was born in 1909, July 14th. today,
Yes.
and she passed in 1981. I think it's important to point out just briefly that Helen was raised in a very unloving, critical, and selfish environment. She, her parents were just very much into themselves. They were Jewish, but they were non-observant. Helen, her only connection with religion was with her nanny, who was Roman Catholic, and her cook, who was Baptist. So there's kind of a little mix there. And her parents certainly didn't care about her spiritual upbringing. And she, in fact, they were quite brutal to her, not physically, but would call her names and just ignored her. So she did not have a typical or even an atypical upbringing with any type of religion, really. So it was kind of confusing, I'm sure, to her at some point. But as she grew up, she ultimately even as a child, she would close her eyes and see images in black and white, just images like snapshots, not movies or whatever. And she wouldn't think, oh, I want to think about trees and close her eyes and see trees. She would just close her eyes and things would appear. And in fact, they would even appear with her eyes open. She would see these snapshots. She didn't know what they were. Some she enjoyed, some she wondered, but this went on for quite a while. And then she, out of the blue, these images and dreams that she would have too, started to become animated and in color. Again, she had no idea why anything was there. But if you think about it, with her from a child in this odd little place where she was not nurtured, and she had these people kind of helping her along with Catholicism and being a Baptist and so forth, and then seeing these things, you could see where she would be agnostic, and she ultimately ended up being quite an angry atheist.
An angry atheist, that's an interesting
Yes.
term, because as we've come to learn about Helen, she did have issues with anger, especially when it came to her resistance to the actual material that was being given to her. But when we talk about atheism, it reminds me of one of our beloved teachers, Ram Dass, because he says he was a point in his life where he was an atheist. He also grew up in a Jewish household that was not observing, and he became very interested in, just sort of exploring his mind and experimenting with drugs. He was a professor at Harvard, and he had a good friend in Timothy Leary, and they started experimenting with LSD. And he said that as an atheist, the only way I could seek whatever these people seem to think is God is through drugs, and through taking the drugs that took him to this place that had him wondering, what is this? What is this other aspect of what may be a higher self, a higher way of thinking and being? And he said, I'm not sure if these are his words, but these are words that'll come up later in your talk. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to access this part of my brain that is highly activated and seems to be peeking in at what you call God. And that's where he went for his search for meaning, and ended up in India with his beloved guru Neem Karoli Baba, and then came back as a very highly consciously, masterly reached teacher of spiritual wisdom. And so maybe atheism is a way to be a blank slate, because there's
Exactly.
no doctrine, there's no stake in the ground, this is how it has to be. It's kind of like, all right, here's my canvas, it's blank, it's open, let's fill it in with something. And that's where Helen was.
Yes, and the blank slate is interesting. I like that, because although with Helen there was such, to me, chaos in her youth, her infancy, and her growing up, She just had all kinds of things going on that you could see why she'd go, there's no method to this madness. There can't possibly be a God, you know? So
Yeah.
she ultimately became a psychologist. And she's extremely well educated, a brilliant woman. And she ended up in 1958 being hired by Dr. William Thetford. We're going to call him Bill from now on.
Yeah.
Bill Thetford. And at the University of Columbia University, as well as Presbyterian Hospital. They worked as psychologists, she as Bill's assistant, even though she was several years, quite a few years older than he, she was the assistant. And so she began working with him. And it's important to point out at that time, and I certainly don't know what it's like now, but I know that at that time, that environment was extremely ugly. People were competing with each other for all kinds of things. And even Helen spoke of the environment aesthetically being ugly. And so this is the environment that they were in. So here they are, these two people, brilliant, with all these responsibilities and all these projects, and they do an amazing job together. They work so beautifully together that they actually became, like, when they were involved in a project, they would go to Bill, take walks in the park, go to Bill's apartment, talk about everything, get everything done exactly right, and present these amazing papers. However, there was a rub between the two of them. Bill was quite aloof and laid back, and still brilliant and dedicated, but his personality was such that he was aloof and laid back. Helen was quite annoying, for lack of another word. She was very strict about everything, and they just did not click. Bill said there was no peace between them. They didn't argue and fight and all that stuff when they had a project. Step out of the project, and they didn't particularly care for each other. And so this went on for several years. And in 1965, they were on their way walking to a conference or something like that. And Bill must have been feeling something, or Helen was putting out something, or they were arguing about something. But he said to her, there has got to be a better way, just like you said earlier. There has got to be a better way. He knew they worked together beautifully. What was the issue with them, on a personal level? And he said, and I am determined to find it. And much to his surprise, Helen said, I'll do it with you. And so at this point, there was a connection that hadn't been there, because he was quite surprised, and she just stepped right into it. Yes, we don't know what it is, but yeah. And so that kind of, it didn't change things. It wasn't that, like that, they were like, oh yeah, now we're buddies. It wasn't that. So it did allow her, though, to confide in Bill about some things, like about her childhood and these pictures that she would have, and her dreams going from black and white to color and still and moving and stuff. And so there was some kind of release there that she felt at that moment, and was able to share with him stuff that normally she wouldn't. And so one of the things that she shared with him was about one of her dreams, and that was that she had gone, she was going down a river, and I'm sorry, there's a word in here I'm going to say, and it's very, I have to look at it. She was floating down a river on a boat, beautiful little river, and she came across a chest um, covered in seaweed and all this icky stuff, and she pulls it out and she opens it up, and the only thing in it is this black book with gold, with a word in gold written along the binding, and that word was Esculapius. And that's why I wanted to hold it up. I didn't want to try to remember it. Esculapius. And she's like, I remember that word, but I wasn't, I'd heard it, but I wasn't sure what it was. And she looked it up, and it turned out to be the name of the god of healing.
Yeah, listen, I had kudos to you for getting the word out. I've looked at it so many times and I'm like, all right, let's see, how do you say that? But you know, how interesting is that? Because from an interfaith perspective, we always look at A Course in Miracles from an interfaith perspective, even though it's written in Christian language. But here it kicks off in something that has more to do with Greek mythology, which is really interesting. And yet, A Course in Miracles is all about healing, but of the mind. It's not so concerned with healing the body. It's about healing the mind, because the mind is where those ego constructs and those subconscious messages become solidified in our way of thinking. And so A Course in Miracles is about healing those ego constructs, releasing the grip that they have on us, so that we can return to our true, authentic spiritual self. So the God of healing is looking at Helen back in 1965, which, by the way, is the same time so many other spiritual, not religious movements were launched. And we are in the practice, in the spiritual practice as students of A Course in Miracles, to forgive our mind, to heal our mind, to forgive other minds, to heal each other together, so that we can move forward truly heart to heart, soul to soul, without so much of those ego constructs.
Thank you. And that's not a coincidence, and that's what I love about the mystics. That's not a coincidence. It might have sounded interesting or not at all, just confusing at the time, but as we move ahead, like you said, I mean, it's all about healing when we talk about A Course in Miracles. So in all fairness to Helen, this is not an easy time for her, because she is having these weird experiences that she's had all her life, but now she's got, things seem to be becoming just a little more intense. And she's a psychologist. That's a science. And while psychology is probably more expansive than physics, it's still a science. And so here she is in these highly scientific environments, and very competitive. She starts to become pretty agitated about what's going on with her and what's real and what isn't. And at this time, she had like an experience that, and I don't know if you want to call it a psychic experience or just a vision or what she had, but she saw herself in a cave, and she finds there's a scroll, nothing in the cave but a scroll. And so she unties the scroll and she slowly opens up the scroll. And as she opens it up, in huge letters are the words, God is.
God is.
And God is. And as she continued to unravel it, she started seeing little letters all over the place. And she had no idea, what that was all about. And it was very confusing to her. So she had, one of the other things that's important to point out is that she would hear a voice sometimes, which of course did not help this going, what's real, what isn't real, what's going on in my mind. She would hear a voice, and it would just, this one said, and she didn't ask it anything. She just heard this voice say, the letters on the left are the past. The letters on the right are the future. So she said to herself, or the voice or whatever, well, I don't care about the past or the future. And the only thing she cared about was God is.
Yeah, and wanting to dig deeper into that and wanting to understand what does that really mean and where's that taking us. So just a little point of reference, because I looked up God is in the course. There's a course website where you can look up a word, a phrase. It's just amazing. They've done great work, and that's A Course in Miracles.org, ACIM.org. And it's sponsored by the Foundation for Inner Peace, which was the ultimate first highly produced publisher of A Course in Miracles. But anyway, so I looked up God is, because the manual came first, and that took several years, and then the lessons came later, 365 lessons, and 365 lessons are opportunities for us to practice what is told to us in the manual. So I looked up God is, and it shows up in 8 lessons. Now, there's some lessons that are continued. They're called, they're considered to be giant strides. Like, if you really get this lesson, it's going to create a shift in you, because those mental constructs are fear, judgment, expectation, those things that keep us from truly feeling love and feeling inner peace. So I wanted to just briefly, if you don't mind me interrupting,
No.
God is lesson 29, 30, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. These are all lessons that are compact, telling us God is. God is in everything I see. God is in everything I see, because God is in my mind. God is my strength. God is my source. God is the light in which I see. God is the mind in which I think. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. It is continuously bringing us back to what truly is here in this moment. If I'm upset, if I'm judging, if I'm in my expectations, if I'm in my unpleasant conversation with someone, how do I bring myself back by what is the truth of me? What is the truth of you? God is, love is, source is, our higher self is. And the Course is continuously reminding us to please come back to that. Please come back to that.
Thank you so much for plucking them out, because they should be on everybody's refrigerator, no matter who you are. Just as a little reminder, kind of keep you in line a little bit, and to help you with your train of thought, where you're going with your next thought.
Right, especially with trusting the next thought, because there is a line that says, trust would solve all problems now. If we can truly trust our inner guidance, our higher holy self inner guidance, we'd stop listening to that pesky ego. Guilty, but that's why it's spiritual practice. So more about Helen.
So the next thing it's still 1965. What a year it must have been for those guys.
Yeah.
And Helen had told Bill that she felt like she was a channel. This voice was becoming more prominent, that she had just, I think, up to a certain point, had just kind of accepted, like she accepted the pictures when she was a child and growing up, and the moving and all that stuff. So she said to Bill, I feel like a channel, but I feel like I'm clogged. I keep hearing the voice say, this is A Course in Miracles. Please take notes. Now, here's a specific thing that this voice that she has yet to even figure out, it's probably more of an aggravation than anything else at this point, because she's struggling with being a psychologist and having this happen. And so, needless to say, she tells Bill, I've let you know that I feel like I'm going crazy, but it's getting worse. I mean, this is not good. And he said, why don't you do this? he said, start writing down everything. Just start writing it down and bring it in. We will talk about it. And if, it doesn't make any sense, or, it's too disturbing for you or whatever, we'll forget about it. But write it down. Okay. So she comes in, she says yes, dutiful assistant to the professor, as an assistant professor, she's dutiful, and dutiful to the voice now. So the next morning she comes in and she is ready to just say, I'm done, before they even talk about it.
I'm not doing
I'm
this.
done. But Bill spent a lot of time calming her down. And you can understand why, because he knew her professionally and was seeing this all unwind. And it was, pretty weird to him too. So, but he was always trying to calm her down. So he says, listen, just read it to me and we'll take it from there. And he was astounded by these words from the very beginning that said, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, herein lies the peace of God. And he's like, I don't think he said it to her, but he's like, this isn't Helen. This isn't Helen.
Right. That's when he realized this has got to be channeled, because this is not something that she herself would think of, but not that she doesn't even believe in. And, the first time I saw that, it was because when I first got my very first copy of A Course in Miracles, it was like late 70s, early 80s. It had just been published. It was pretty newly published. It was actually missing a lot of lines that came later in the 90s. But when you open it up in the Foundation for Inner Peace edition, that's what you see. You see those words italicized as soon as you open the book.
Mm-hmm.
And in all honesty, I was a little bit astounded at the time too, because I was sort of in my search for truth. And one of the things that I had been studying was Hinduism. And one of the Hindu prayers starts by saying, take me from the unreal to the real. And here we have a similar theme in all our mystics that reminds us that we need to be focused on what the truth of what we consider reality is, a higher truth, not this lower earth illusion.
Exactly. So they decide, okay, I'll just Helen's going to continue to write everything down, and Bill's going to continue he's going to transcribe it onto the typewriter. And but poor Helen just was struggling. Bill, and this is just something that I think Bill was just intrigued deeply, knew it was very spiritual, for the lack of another word. That's mine, not his. But Helen was just going out of her mind. And so she was a dedicated assistant. She was dedicated to taking the notes. She said she would, she did, and she wasn't going to stop. But she wasn't going to stop questioning her own sanity as well. But sometimes it would be so bad that Bill would she would be so anxious with the words that she was saying to him, even though she wasn't analyzing them, she was just saying them. She was just anxious and scared and stuttering, that he would hold her hand with his one hand and type with the other to try to keep her calm. And I think that's a neat connection there too. As a metaphor kind of thing,
Yes, I'd love to see that picture.
Yeah, I could just, picture it too. So the one thing that they both found very just not disturbing and weird was the word miracle. And because let's face it, when we think of miracles, we think of walking on water, moving mountains, healing, making cancer go away through prayer or whatever, those are miracles. So, and of course, miracle, of course, in miracles uses that word. And so
Yeah, I wanted,
until
okay, excuse me, I wanted to say something about the miracle, because you were talking about, the metaphor of our spiritual path, and Bill holding on to Helen's hand while she was nervous. It's kind of like the image of, in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says, I'll take you by the hand, and I will never let
yes,
you go. I'll always be waiting for you. And here we have the miracle of the shift in consciousness, is what we talk about a miracle being. A shift in consciousness. When I'm upset with you, when I want to say mean things, when I want to call you 10 times and tell you about yourself, and instead I say, let me think about what might be happening with you. How can I love you? How can I be compassionate to you? How can I open my heart? That's the miracle, the shift in consciousness that comes out as a shift in behavior, a shift in connection, and how we speak to each other, how we receive each other. And their relationship was a miracle. That was a complete and total shift of
absolutely.
animosity and anger to, we're going to work together, we're going to make something happen. We may not understand it, and that's why she's a reluctant mystic. And he was a wonderful visionary to continue holding her hand and to continue working with her for all the years it took to make this happen.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, because that nails it. So now they're continuing, and the beginning of the text and how they structured it, it's not up to me, but there were 50 principles in the very beginning of the text. And by the time they got through these 50 principles, Bill realized, hey, something's going on here. He who had been paying very close attention to those principles and everything that had brought them to it, and the introduction and all that, he knew something was going on inside of him, and he decided that he was going to practice what he was hearing. And he was just immersed in it. Helen, on the other hand, couldn't have cared less what it was saying, except for the aha moments or whatever, we're getting closer and closer. And but she was, as I've said all along, was completely dedicated and committed, as mystics, any of the mystics that we've looked at have often gone, what is going on? But they stay committed. There is a commitment, and she stayed committed to scribing every single thing that the voice, which she had in all her mind knew was Jesus. Some people call it the voice, some people call it whatever, some people call it Jesus. She knew it was Jesus. She didn't think it was, she knew it was, which is interesting too. But then, so she while she was committed to doing it, she wasn't committed to the control that this voice, that Jesus kind of popped into her life anytime he felt like it. She'd be minding her own business and he'd start talking, but she could tell him, I'll get back to you. I don't want to talk now. But when and she could also conjure him up, say, hey, I got a question. But when she did tell him, I don't want to do it now, particularly at night when she was tired, she did not want to do it. She would lie in bed and go, oh, son of a gun, and have to get up and write down every word he said, not ask him to repeat it. It was in her, and she would write it down. So this is just such a profound part of mysticism to me that I have seen, and we've talked about throughout our whole 6 months here, is this commitment. no matter how crazy, and in this, I hate to use the word crazy when we're talking about psychology, but because it's not a very, politically correct word, but this is, she thought she was going crazy every time she turned around. And things were getting deeper and deeper, and she was feeling, it would be nice if that was making her feel calmer and calmer, but it was making her feel crazier and crazier. And in the meantime, she's writing everything down that Jesus is saying to her. So, I mean, it's just amazing. So,
Bill was being called in to be her calming agent, as you were saying.
absolutely.
He was there. He was also being guided. Yeah, and you're right. There's stories about how he would go to colleagues and he would just practice. He would go into different offices and practice what he was learning, practicing being kind and caring and
Yeah.
seeing the other person with eyes of love. I believe they were being called to a holy relationship, Bill. They were being called together
Absolutely.
to rise above their animosity, their judgments, their anger. And he was her example. He was sort of a reflection for her of the things she was writing so that she could see it actually played out in real life. And, and she had issues with him, issues with her husband, Louis, who was, a patient man. And, they themselves entered into a holy relationship, which is, it's another aspect of understanding A Course in Miracles and a Holy Instant and how we relate to one another, which, as you know, I have another podcast where I'm talking about holy relationships.
Right.
I have another one that I feel is, so essential for all of us who are looking at psychology, and they're psychologists, but we have to look at our own psychology. How much have I healed my own emotional self so that I can be my best spiritual self? That's part of all our journeys.
Exactly. And so Helen continues, and my heart just aches for her because I just think how hard it must have been. And I get so much out of the course that I feel closer to her than any of the mystics that I have studied. And I thought I felt close to some of them until this. I mean, and I do, but not like this. But she came in one day, or she had come in early. He even earlier than he did, and she was just so broken. And she was saying that the stuff that Jesus had said to her, it was nonsense. It was nonsense. And Bill's like, look, just read it to me. Just read it to me. And we'll take it from there. And so she read it. He typed it and then read it back to her. And when they were done with the reading, just a few paragraphs, Helen was shaking and shivering, burst into tears. Bill his voice was croaking. He could barely speak, get through this passage. And because to both of them, it resonated as like the Lord's Prayer. And I'm going to share that at the end of our meeting. I don't want to read it right now. I don't want to break up our conversation. But at that time, when the two of them felt that way that they felt, so moved beyond speaking, that Bill said to himself, I believe that this is the better way. Yeah. That Helen and I were given this, whatever it is, because to make things better. And as you said, he didn't say this, but this is what I'm saying. They entered into a holy relationship.
Yes. Yes.
And it just became, and he saw that this is the better way, as this supernatural or whatever thing you want to call it. So I just think that was just an amazing awareness. Helen didn't think it. She didn't not think it. She didn't. If she said it, I haven't read anywhere where she said that's when it all changed for me too. But I just thought that was pretty cool. So, so after that transpired, it's just on so many levels that things went the way they went, because there were parts of the text that fell into iambic pentameter. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but when we learned about iambic pentameter in school, it was really tough and annoying and all that kind of stuff. It was, Bill called it, he loved it. It's a la da 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 da, you know. And it is very beautiful when you're not a punky little 7th grader who thinks, oh, what do I care about an iambic pentameter? But it was, they were like, hey, wait a minute, are we doing this? Is this what happened? You know, but it wasn't every bit of it. And I know for me, no longer the punky 7th grader, when I am reading A Course in Miracles and it falls into iambic pentameter, I feel just like Bill, who thought it was words and music at the same time, and Helen thought it was poetry. And I get it. It's like singing poems when you're reading an instruction or guidance or whatever it is from the text.
You know, there are some people who are not advocates of A Course in Miracles, who have said things like, oh, well, she loved Shakespeare, she loved poetry, she must have made that happen. But here's why that's part of the miracle as well, is because she didn't even realize it. There were times when the editing process took place with Ken Wapnick later on in time, that they broke up the iambic pentameter because they didn't realize it. At some point, somebody realized it and said, oh, that's why it was finally getting around to soothing Helen. It was a beautiful divine intervention that allowed iambic pentameter to enter into Helen's energy system without her consciously knowing it, because she was so resistant. And so it was like 20-something chapters in before she started feeling the rhythm of it and getting back into the willingness and the surrender to be in this reluctant channel, and therefore a reluctant mystic. So yeah, it's the miracle of iambic pentameter.
And I'll tell you, it is a miracle when, even if you are someone, and I can speak from experience, even if you are not someone who has anything to do with iambic pentameter, you don't know anything about it and don't really care anything about it. If you're reading A Course in Miracles and you find yourself in this flow where you're understanding things more deeply, you're hearing them more clearly, it's amazing. It's just amazing. And it's not something that I think that, you know, it's not something that you can just, it would be a waste of time to go through line by line looking for it. But it's a neat thing when you're reading along and then all of a sudden it's like sliding down a hill. It's just beautiful, just beautiful.
Well, you know, there was I don't know if anybody knows who James Twyman is. He's a musician, an interfaith musician. He's also a teacher of A Course in Miracles. And he did a journey of music to each and every lesson. And he put a CD out, no, he actually put a DVD out with showing his journey, meeting up with different musicians, and he calls it A Chorus in Miracles. And he talks about iambic pentameter, and they actually read so that in a poetic way, so that you can kind of get it. Because I never really even knew what iambic pentameter was, wasn't even sure if I was saying it, and I wasn't even a punky 7th grader. I didn't get punky till ninth grade, but but yeah, there's so many miracles. And you know, one of the things I also wanted to mention was something you said reminded me of it in terms of scribing, was there is an accelerated edition of A Course in Miracles that came out in 2017 called the CE edition. It's when the Circle of Atonement added back into the FIP edition, Foundation for Inner Peace, some lines that had been edited out, but also something called cameos. And those cameos are where Helen wrote about personal interactions she had with Jesus, and she didn't know if they were meant for the book or not, for the ultimate publication. And there's one where Jesus calls her Ezra, and
Wow.
it's like, who? And it turns out that Ezra was an ancient scribe.
Yeah.
And so, we wonder, is there reincarnation, or is there just an elevation of our souls? But did he accidentally? No, there's no accidents. There's only spiritual synchronicities. He called her Ezra, and it kind of like woke her up like, oh, who's that? That's me, Ezra. Ezra was an ancient scribe, and Ezra has now been chosen to be a modern day scribe. Another miracle. I mean, how beautiful is that?
Of course. It's just miracle after miracle.
Yes.
Well, they are, let's see, where are we now? So
well, there was the text, and they thought it took a couple years to do the text, and they thought that, oh, when are we going to be done?
We're done.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah.
Yay.
And the voice said, you'll hear amen, but amen only referred to the text, because we still had the lessons and the manual for teachers. So it took a total of 9 years, I believe.
Yeah. So it was quite an experience for them, and it's interesting that I can only imagine what it was like when they thought, oh, amen. I hear the word amen, and so that it's done. And then the next thing you know, Jesus comes back and goes, excuse me, that part is done.
There's more.
Now we move on to the lessons, the manual, and ultimately the clarification of terms. But so at that point, they had these just piles and piles of stuff. And Bill made several Xerox copies. And I could just see him, cranking them out or whatever.
With that little blue paper in between. Right.
Yeah. And because he didn't even know why he was doing it. He just knew this needed to be saved. So he cranked it out. And he also shared copies with a couple of friends who shared copies with friends, and people were cranking them out all over the place. Bill and Helen, by 1972, Bill and Helen knew that the book, it was to become a book. It was to be edited, it was to be published, and it was to be disseminated. And they knew that divinely, I believe they knew, this is not our part. We did our part. So with that, enter what they needed in order to get the books out.
Yeah, there were a couple of different publications. I think the one that people are there's one that has that black cover with the pearls from the very first vision. But the one that has been most highly publicized and used, and which I use in teaching, is the blue book, Foundation for Inner Peace. That's the one that had been initially edited, and now we have what they call the purple book, the CE edition. It's the same study. I think that if people just look for teachers, they'll find that the lessons are consistent. The ultimate truth is that we are here to pray harder, rise higher, love steadily, forgive readily. And love steadily came from one of the admonitions that Jesus gave to Helen when she said, oh, she was complaining about her husband. What am I supposed to do? And he said, love him, love steadily. And so that is what we're here to do. Love steadily, forgive readily. We have lots of opportunities every day to love, forgive, and also to heal ourselves, to heal our minds, to heal the ways in which we, act out or, become that punky 7th grader, whatever it is, when we have our spiritual amnesia, that we have this tool. This is a wake-up tool. This is like an alarm clock. Thank you, Alan. It's a beautiful opportunity to learn what it is to be reluctant, to continuously fall off the path and come back, keep coming back.
Yes.
Just come back with the willingness to do a little bit better today than how I did yesterday.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Oh,
bringing Helen
my pleasure.
full circle from all the folks that we talked about. Was there anything else you wanted to say, or are we ready to wrap it up?
Well, I would like to end with I call it a prayer.
Yes.
The passage. I would like to end up with that. So before we end, I would like to say that I want to thank you so much for the myriad opportunities that we've had to get to know each other, and also to share our journeys, and to share them with others too. And I'd like to just to mention a little tidbit that some people may not know, and probably most people don't know, is that Miracles with a Twist is where the class that you taught for many years and still teach in a different way, but still teach. And this 6 months that we did together was a sprout of that.
Yes.
And when we did Miracles with a Twist conversations last year, that was also a sprout. You would talk about a lesson, and then I would tell you all, because I get so excited over the lessons. would blather on about what resonated with me and how I could use it and so forth. So that was just such a wonderful experience for me, and this too. And there's going to be more. I know in what ways I don't know, but it's very important to know that Miracles with a Twist is part of your ministry, LMC Interfaith Ministries, an actual 501c3 ministry. And that, by the way, has to pay to keep the lights on and computer costs and all that kind of stuff. And that there's even we even have that has come from that is a little gathering called Embracing Spirit, Women Embracing Spirit. And there's just been so many things helping people in need. And so LMC is my church. It is my church, and it can be anybody's church. And I would really like people to just take a look at your channel that has Miracles with a Twist, Miracles with a Twist conversations, mystic conversations, all kinds of neat stuff. And there's also other neat stuff in there too, music, all kinds of things. But it's all comes from LMC. But I will let you talk about LMC as far as the lights staying on and the computers being fixed and all that.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you. You've always been such a great advocate for LMC Interfaith Ministries, and you take up where our beloved Pam left off and saying, make sure you ask for donations, and make sure you. I'm not a great self-marketer, so I've never been good at pushing that, but
I have no problem.
I appreciate it. I will put links in the comments for people to opportunities to make kind and generous tax-deductible donations. And if you want to sign up for my email mailing list, I can keep you updated on all the different things we do. Right now, we do Miracles with a Twist podcasts with guests and with different themes. I'm starting to do music reels now that have inspirational messages on them. We do full moon gatherings. We have the private group of Women Embracing Spirit, and I do a daily inspirational message that I send out by WhatsApp if anyone's interested in that. So thank you again, Goddi Lisa, for always being my biggest fan. And thank you for these wonderful mystics. I'm just going to remind everybody who we've talked about from the beginning. We started with Julian of Norwich. We had Rumi, Marabai, Moses, Thomas Merton, and now our beloved reluctant mystic, Helen Schucman. And thank you for all the hard work you've done, because I know you're the one who's done all the digging deep to bring these people back to life. So thank you very
I
much.
love it. I love it. And I see the common threads, and I see the struggles, and I see the compassion, and I see the transformation, and it gives me hope. The more I study them, the more I read them, just the more I learn, the more hope I have in difficult times and joyful times. It brings me hope. So
Thank
it was
you.
a pleasure. And I would now, unless there's something else you'd like to share.
No, I wanted to say, it brings me hope too. I was saying thank you for saying that part, because we all need to do better, rise higher, and we're only responsible for ourselves and making that happen. And so now we have all these mystics to learn from.
Yep.
And to go back to and study. So thank you so much again. And I look forward to being in this moment as you bring that prayer back for all of us as we end our time together.
Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given and accept this into the minds which you created and which you love. Amen.
Amen. Wow. What a wonderful series of lines of remembering. Let's all remember to wake up. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And this is a wrap for Mystic Conversations for now. I love you. God bless you.
Love you too.